योगः कर्मसु कौशलम्.
Hello everyone, I am Dr. Hemal Pandya, Professor SD School of Commerce, Gujarat University, Ahmedabad. I am highly thankful to UGC HRDC Center of Gujarat University to give me this opportunity to interact with you and deliver my lecture on research designs for research in commerce and management. UGC HRDC has ranked 15th in India and number 1 in Gujarat by its pioneering programs conducted as refresher course, orientation course and STC programs. I am also thankful to Professor Dr. Jagdish Joshi, Professor and Director of UGC HRDC, Gujarat University, Ahmedabad, for his continuous efforts and hard working attitude for the development of the HRDC Center of Gujarat University. To start with the topic, the main contents of the topic will be, we are going to talk about research designs. So the main contents will be meaning of research design, need for the research design, features of a good research design, objectives of the research design, components of research design, process of developing a research design, types of research design and selection of a research design. The main course outcomes from this course will be that the participants will be able to understand the intricacies of the research designs. They will be able to elaborate the various types of research designs, their objectives, their feature, nature and applications of the research designs in the fields of commerce and management. They will be able to clarify their concepts and the conceptual issues related to the research designs. They will be able to examine the suitability of the research design to answer the research questions and serve the objectives for your study, for your research study. You will be able to select an appropriate research design and you will also be able to plan out a systematic research design for your research study. To start with the definition of research, management research especially, it is an unbiased, structured and sequential method of inquiry directed towards the clear and implicit or explicit business objective. This inquiry might be leading to validating of the existing postulates, arriving at the new theories and models. So ultimately, the ultimate aim of the research in commerce and management is to arrive at fruitful and meaningful managerial decisions, which will help to develop the business and lead to the growth of the business in a profitable and rational manner. To define a research problem can be defined as a gap or uncertainty in the decision maker's existing body of knowledge which inhibits efficient decision making. The gap can be academic and theoretical or real time and action oriented. When it is theoretical gap, we call it the basic research, which is going to extend the arena of the existing knowledge of the subject of the discipline, whereas when it is an applied orientation, that when it is a real time action oriented research, we call it applied research. Decision making environment, the managerial decision making faces 3 different kinds of environments lying on a continuous continuum between 2 extremes, complete uncertainty and complete certainty. Under complete uncertainty, the outcomes of the alternative decisions are unpredictable, whereas under complete certainty the alternatives can be predictable. In between lies the risk factor, which the risk we define it as measurable uncertainty. So measurable uncertainty is risk and it is on a continuous continuum between the 2 extremes. Majority of the times complete certainty and complete uncertainty, they are very idealistic situations and they may not be relevant in the real phenomenon, but majority of the times the manager faces risk factor, and this risk factor is measurable, can be predicted. So there are ways and means to measure the risk factor associated with every decision. So manager has to decide which alternative decisions he can take, and he also has to decide what will be the risk factor associated with each one of them, and under this scenario he will try to take rational decisions. Very popular principle of management is iceberg principle, which says that a business problem lies below the surface more than above the surface. That is, it says that it is like a huge iceberg under which it can be perceived from various dimensions, and the research problem which the manager faces or which the researcher studies, that is just like a small teaspoon of a huge iceberg, and most of it underlies the below the waters, and that's why it is very much necessary for the managers to dig into the waters in order to identify the real picture of the research problem. And that's why the principle of bounded rationality is very necessary, which says that the manager has to take the decisions under the constraint scenario, under the bounded scenario. It is bound by the knowledge available to him at a particular point of time, the resources available to him at a particular point of time, and how fairly he can use the resources for arriving at optimum decisions. Research design, defining the research design. Majority of the researchers, they face a crucial problem in deciding what kind of research design is appropriate for them, or for their study what kind of research design they should use, or they should develop the research design in what way, so that they can achieve their goals and objectives of the study in a smooth manner. So research design, it is basically defined as it deals with the primarily with the aim, purposes, intentions and plans within the practical constraints of location, time, money and availability of staff. Actually, research design is a framework, it is a systematic framework, it is a plan of action, it is a blueprint or a strategy of conducting the research study in a scientific manner. According to Skills et al., a research design is an arrangement of the essential condition for collection and analysis of data in a form that aims to combine relevance of the research purpose with economy in the procedures. Suchman has pointed out that a research design is not highly specific plan to be followed without deviations, but rather a series of guideposts to keep one handed in the right direction. That means that the research design is a tentative plan of action which helps the researcher to show the right direction in which he should move in order to conduct a focused research which will serve the purpose or objectives, but it is not to be strictly followed. Many times you may need to modify your plans as we move further with the research study. We may need to change the strategies, we may need to change our actions, but the basic guidelines are provided by the research design. So thus research design is a tentative outline of the proposed research work. The plan, it is not very specific one, it is simply the set of guidelines to keep the research scholars in right track. It tells the others what study design you are proposing to use, how you are going to select your respondents, how you are going to collect the information from your respondents, how the information you are going to collect is to be analyzed, how you are going to communicate with your findings, plus you have to give the rationale and justification for all the above decisions, plus support them critically from the reviewed literature. This means that most of the studies, the research studies in business and management, they are empirical studies based upon data, the real data. Fine, and it is very important to collect the data in appropriate form, in appropriate manner, in order to serve the research objectives. Fine, and that's why it is very necessary that the data collection process itself is conducted in a well structured and scientific manner, so that the analysis results will serve the purpose of the research directly. And that's why we need to justify and give the rationale behind all the decisions which are made in the process of conducting research. We also need to support our decisions by critical evaluation and by supportive evidences from the past literature, which will help to come out to the final rational decisions. A research design is a plan, structure and strategy of investigation to obtain answers to the research questions or problems. It includes an outline of what the investigator will do from writing the hypothesis to the final analysis of data. This definition was given by Kurlinger, 1986. A traditional research design is a blueprint or detailed plan for how the research study is to be completed. This was given by Thayer, 1993. Various authors, they have tried to define research designs in various ways, but ultimately they mean the same thing, that it is a structured plan, it is a well organized plan of conducting the research in a scientific manner. So, research design is an arrangement of the conditions for collection and analysis of data in a manner that aims to combine the relevance to the research purpose with the economy in the procedure. It is a framework or blueprint of the research plan of action. It is a master plan that specifies the methods and procedures for collecting and analyzing the needed information. It gives the strategy of data collection, data compilation, data analysis, and ultimately coming out with the final outcomes and findings of the research study. Thus, it is a master plan specifying the methods and procedures for collecting and analyzing the needed information. What readers want to know from the research design? What are the expectations of the readers or the evaluators of the research study in order to evaluate the particular research study? The readers will concentrate upon the purpose of study, which may be descriptive, hypothesis testing, or case study analysis. The types of investigation, which may be clarification, correlational, or experimental. The extent of research interference may be minimal interference or manipulation. It may be unit of analysis, that is the population to be studied. It may be study settings that may be contrived or non-contrived, that is artificial settings or natural environment, and time horizon, which may be cross-sectional or longitudinal. Many researchers, they confuse between research methods and research design, but there are some basic differences between research methods and research designs. The research methods are the procedures that will be used to collect and analyze the data, whereas research design is the overall structure of the research. The research methods, they focus on what type of methods are more suitable for collection of data and analyzing the data for the evidence needed, whereas research design focuses on what type of study is planned and what kind of results are expected from a particular research study. The research methods depend on the research design, whereas the research design is based on research questions and research problems. So, looking to these differences, we can realize that our first step is to frame the research questions. From that, we can turn out to research objectives, and these objectives will be served in the research study, and for that purpose we need to establish a research design. We need to develop a structured research design which is a well established systematic plan of study, and from that we can decide what research method should be utilized to analyze the data further. Need of a research design. It may result in the desired type of study with useful conclusions. It reduces inaccuracy. It helps to get optimum efficiency and reliability. It minimizes the wastage of time. It minimizes uncertainty, confusion, and practical hazards associated with any research problem. It is helpful in collection of research material and hypothesis testing, and it is the guidepost for giving the research right direction. Basic functions of a research design are going into the right direction, reducing the wastage in terms of time, cost, and other resources, encouraging coordination and effectiveness of the research study, to develop a tentative plan which undergoes modifications if necessary. It relies upon the availability of data and cooperation from the informants to keep within the manageable limits. It is very necessary to keep the research study within the manageable limits, because if you just go on conducting the research for a very long period, it is quite possible that by the time you finish up your research study, the results will be outdated. Fine. So, it should be manageable, it should be large enough, but sufficiently large enough to see that the result outcomes are validated and generalizable, as well as you have to see that it is within the manageable limits. That is, it is necessary to finish the research study within a complete time bound structure. It helps in taking the decisions about how to complete the entire research validly, objectively, accurately, and economically. It facilitates smooth flow of the various research processes. It would result in more accurate results with the minimum usage of time, effort, and money. It organizes the study in certain way, defending the advantages of doing well, being aware, and also points out the caution about potential disadvantages. It maintains the control to avoid bias that may affect the outcomes. Research designs helps in advanced planning of the methods which are adopted for collecting the relevant data, and it provides the scheme for answering the research questions. The basic characteristics of a good research design. How we can say that a particular research design is a good one. So, how to identify a good research design? So, some basic characteristics are regularity, that is the state of character or the fact of being regular. Verifiability, that is your results must be verifiable by some empirical evidences and some other supportive documents. Generalizability, that is they must be you must be able to generalize those results for all such similar situations for which you are going to study. Predictability, that is you must be able to predict the future scenario based upon the present study and present results, and what you must be able to measure what sort of uncertainty will be faced by the researchers in future. Objectivity, that is the results should be unbiased and not subjective. They should not be affected by the researchers own perspectives and own thinking viewpoints. Systematization, that is in a coherent and orderly manner. They should be reliable and valid. That means they must be assure reliability and validity. They must be able to control the extraneous variables. Statistical precision for hypothesis testing procedures are necessary to be decided, and they must be flexible enough to accommodate all the changes in the dynamic environment under which the research study is conducted. The process of research design is just similar to the basic steps of the research process, the process of conducting the entire research scenario. The first step is defining the research problem. Next is literature review, identifying the area of study, narrowing down to the objectives of the study, deciding the sampling design, deciding the data collection methods and data collection measures, what sample size should be used, how you will collect the data, from where you will collect the data, in what manner, in what format you will collect the data. All those things have to be decided here. Analysis and interpretation of the data. There is a huge variety of tools and techniques available for data analysis, and to choose a right technique at right point of time, depending upon the objective of study and the nature of data available, that is very important to decide for a researcher. Presentation of data, then hypothesis testing, tools and techniques to be used in a particular research study, organization of the study, limitations of the study, significance of the study, future possibilities in the research, and implications of the research. So the researcher must be able to identify all these stages in a very specific systematic manner before it starts with the research study itself, before it starts with the research, because he has to be acting in a very well planned manner. Otherwise there are many chances that he will go out of the track and he will not be able to focus on his own objectives. So these are the steps of the research process which we have already discussed. The main types of research processes, there are three main types of research processes in literature: passive observation, unobtrusive intervention, and obtrusive intervention. Passive observation is where the researcher does not have to play any active role. There are already well established theories and there are already well established theoretical conjectures which are supposed to be tested empirically through small sample. Even sampling procedure is not so complex here, and because the only aim of the study is just to validate the theories and in a very simple manner. So in this case the researcher is going to play a passive role. Another design is unobtrusive or intrusive design, where there is the role of data. A relatively larger data is collected over here, and so that the results may be generalizable to the wider population, and the studies may be more elaborative and more concrete in terms of the analysis part, and ultimately you are trying to confirm the theory and develop the future theories, or if necessary you can refine the existing theories. The last type is obtrusive design. Here the researcher has to play a very active role and in a very well structured scientific manner, because most of these studies are based upon hypothesis testing and experimental designs, where he cannot just skip or generalize the results on the basis of small sample data or small sample analysis. He has to conduct a full-fledged study in a very well scientific manner, and if necessary he has to conduct the experiments also in order to validate the results. Sometimes he may go for ex ante and ex post measurement of the phenomenon, so that comparative analysis can be turned out, and ultimately from this he will again try to confirm the theory or develop the future theories or refine the existing theories as per the requirements. The main elements of the research design are four basic elements: sampling design, observational design, statistical design, and operational design. Sampling design, it deals with the methods of selecting the items to be observed for the study. Observational design, it relates to the condition under which the observations are to be created. Statistical design concerns with how the information and the data are gathered for analysis purpose. And operational design, it deals with the techniques by which the procedures are satisfied in sampling. Based upon these elements, the basic components of a research design can be summarized. They will start with the title of the study, stating the problem in the form of a problem statement, reviewing the literature, identifying the area and scope of the study, narrowing down to the specific objectives of the study, for formulation of the hypothesis to be tested, definition of the concepts and terminologies which are to be used for analyzing the data, methodologies to be used for data analysis, determining the tools and techniques for data collection, sampling design has to be decided, determining the techniques for data analysis, identifying the limitations of the study, and finally interpretation of the results and checking the validity of the decisions in practice. So the process of formulating the research design consists of the following steps. The first is the designing and planning phase. The second is identification of the population to be studied. The third is specifying the methods to measure the research variables. The fourth is developing the data collection plan. Fifth is the designing the sampling plan. Sixth is finalizing and reviewing the research plan, that is whether it is going to work in accordance with the objectives or not, whether the results will be sufficient enough to serve the basic purpose of the research study or not, and finally conducting the pilot study or revision if at all it is found necessary. So basic objectives of the research design can be mainly summarized in two main points, that is to control the variance and to answer the research questions, and this can be done by elaborating in the following manner. The first is identification or development of the procedures and logistic arrangements required to undertake a study, ensuring the procedures are adequate in quality to obtain the valid, objective and accurate answers to the research questions, and this is called controlling the variance, because when we are almost working with the sample in majority of the times, majority of the research studies, we are hardly working with the entire population. So there will always be some deviation from the true values as far as the parameters of the study are concerned. So we will not be getting the accurate estimates of the parameters. There will be always some variance between the true value and the estimated value. So this variance is to be controlled, because lesser the variance, more the accurate estimates will be of the parameters and more will be the accuracy and precision of the obtained results. So controlling of the variance is very important factor. In identification and development of the procedures, we need to provide the detailed information about who will constitute the study population, how will the study population be identified, will a sample or the whole population be study selected, if the sample is selected, how you will be contacting the people or the respondents, how you will be sorting about for the consent from the respondents to give you the correct responses, what method of data collection will be used and why. In case of questionnaire, where will the responses be recorded and returned, how should the respondents contact you if they have any queries, because many times it happens that when you have circulated some instrument and the respondents might not be able to understand the question and they may be confused as to how to answer. So if they require some queries to be raised, then whom to contact and how to contact. Fine. In the case of interviews, where they will be conducted, the location has to be decided, and how will ethical issues will be taken care of while conducting the data collection process. The second main stage is controlling of variance. We know that the relation between the variables can be established with the view of change in the dependent variable, which is equal to change in the independent variables plus change in the extraneous variables plus change in the chance variables. The dependent and independent variables, we know that dependent variable is one which is affected by the independent variables. Independent variables are those variables which the researcher can assign as an input variables. Extraneous variables are those variables which may not be directly affecting the dependent variable, but they may have indirect effect on the dependent variable, whereas the last is the chance variable. These are for the unknown reasons, uncontrollable causes, uncontrollable factors prevailing in the environment. At any point of time, they may raise the chance variance. So it is very important to control these variances in order to establish a well predictable model. Example is given here to explain the nature of the variables. For example, when you want to measure the performance of the students in an examination, your dependent variable is performance in the examination, independent variable is say heat prevailing in the environment, extraneous variable can be broken or uncomfortable chairs or seats, and chance variable may be if is there any maybe personal problem, maybe the student is not facing good health during the examination, or there may be a lot of noise from the next class. So that will act as the chance variable. This is uncontrollable. Fine. So all these variables, they combinedly they create a model, and this model should be well established through the empirical data, and that model must be validated and checked for its predictability and accuracy of the results. So three basic tenets of the research design, they are: convert the research questions and the stated assumptions or hypotheses into operational variables that can be measured; specify the process that would be followed to complete the above task as efficiently and economically as possible; and specify the control mechanisms that would be used to ensure that the effect of the other variables and that could impact the outcome of the study that has been minimized or negated. Main research paradigms have been defined in the theories. They are positivistic and non-positivistic research processes. Then you may have to choose between these two approaches. Any approach can be chosen depending upon the purpose of study and depending upon what kind of objectives you want to address through your study. And sometimes you may also be using mixed methods, that is combination of both these approaches. It is not that strictly you have to get stuck up to only just one particular object process or one particular paradigm. You can have a combination of both the paradigms if required by your study. So positivist versus non-positivist research paradigms. When we talk about positivist paradigms, it is fairly supported by empirical evidence. It believes that true knowledge is based on experience of senses and can be obtained by observation and experiment. So verified data it should be received from the senses, which will be known as empirical evidence. So all the results must be supported by empirical evidence. That is what the positivist approach talks about. Whereas non-positivism, it is believing in the fact that the knowledge is personally experienced rather than acquired from or imposed from outside. So it is that whatever phenomenon the people are facing in their real life, it is their own perspective, it is their own viewpoint which they will have regarding each phenomenon, and according to their belief they may be able to analyze the information. So that is non-positivist approach. Here there is the comparison between both the approaches is given. As per the dominant data type is considered. In positive approach, mostly it relies upon quantitative and data analysis techniques, whereas non-positivist analysis, it relies upon qualitative techniques. Perspective here, it is objective. Here in case of non-positivity, it is subjective. Focus here is more scientific. In non-positivist approach, it is more humanistic. In as far as the methodology is concerned, here it is more experimentalist, and here it is interpretivist. Context here it is traditional, whereas in non-positivity it is reflexive and reactive. Positivistic sciences, they rely upon the following aspects or following concepts. The first is causality, that is an assumption of linear causality. There are no effects without causes and no causes without effects. So they believe that there are some cause and effect relationships existing between the variables under study, and we need to identify those relations, measure those relations, and use them for future predictions. Second concept is a single tangible reality out there that can be broken apart into the pieces capable of being studied independently. That is, we are always assuming that the entire whole can be reduced into meaningful parts which can be combined enough to get the fruitful outcome at the end of the research study. So that concept is called reductionism. The third is separation of the observer from the observed. That is, the observer is different person from one which is observed. That is one thing, and another, there should be objective noting of the observations without any bias from the side of the observers. So observers should not introduce their own perception or their own beliefs while noting down the results of observational studies, so that the results of an inquiry are essentially free from beliefs, interpretations and bias. What is true at one time and place will also be true at another time and place. That is universality or generalizability. So ultimately we believe on four basic paradigms in positivistic sciences. that is cause and effect relationship, that is causality. Reductionism, that is you can reduce from whole to the parts. Objectivity, that is the results must be recorded objectively without any subjective bias of the researcher. And finally the results should be generalizable. So based upon on this, it requires a clear, whereas non-positivistic approach, it requires a clear understanding of the research question, where to vary substantially depending on the researcher's mode of engagement, which includes socialization, the nature of objects being investigated, outcomes sought from the research, and funding of the research study. Based upon the non-positivist paradigm or parameters, the research design can be classified into these four main categories, that is exploratory, explanatory, descriptive, and causal. Exploratory talks about what is happening, what are the participants and meanings, and how the patterns are linked. Explanatory talks about what shapes or the phenomenon and how do the things interact. Descriptive studies are talking about what are the attributes of the particular data set or particular variables. And causal or predictive results, they talk about what will occur or who will be the affected respondents or the people or the section of the society by the study results. The main another classification is given by various authors for the research designs. It is based upon three main parameters. The first is the number of contacts with the study population, second is the reference period of the study, and third is the nature of investigation. Depending upon the problem of research, initially when we just read the problem, we may realize that all problems are different and there are no similarities between them. But many times we can search out for similarities, and we can also find out some standard successful designs which can be suitable for all similar kind of categories of problems. So, and that leads to some standard classification of research designs. Mainly three categories have been identified based upon the nature of the research designs, that is exploratory, descriptive, and causal research designs. The choice of the most appropriate design depends largely on the objectives of the research and how much is known about the problem and these objectives. The overall research designs for a project may include one or more of these three designs as the part or full. Further, it is not necessary that you have to just stick upon one design, but you can move from exploratory towards causal, because exploratory is the very initial stage of research where when you don't know the problem itself very clearly, and when you want to gain background of the information, when you want to define the terms, when you want to clarify the problems and develop the hypothesis to establish the research priorities and to develop the questions to be answered, in all these cases we can rely upon exploratory research designs. When you want to describe and measure the real phenomenon at a point in time, you have to rely upon descriptive research designs. But when you want to establish the cause and effect relationship, that is determine the causality and test the hypothesis, that is if then kind of studies, in that case you have to rely upon causal research designs. So depending upon the number of contacts, the research designs can be classified as cross-sectional, before-after study, and longitudinal study. Based upon the reference points, they can be classified as retrospective, prospective, and combination of both. And the third is as per the nature of investigation, they can be classified as experimental, non-experimental, and semi-experimental designs. So all the entire classification of research design can be summarized in this chart. The two extreme categories are exploratory research design and conclusive research design. Under the conclusive, you can have two more categories, that is the descriptive and causal. Under the causal research, under the causal research designs, you may have experimental designs, which may be formal or informal experiments. And under the descriptive designs, you may have cross-sectional and longitudinal designs. Under the cross-sectional, it can be single cross-sectional or multiple cross-sectional. So all these research designs, they have their own purpose, they have their own objectives to be served, and they have their own nature, which is differing them one from the other. This is a diagram showing you the degree of structure and degree of statistical analysis required by each of the categories of the designs. And as you can see that as we move from left to right, the complexity of the designs increases, and the statistical analysis required to analyze each particular design, that also becomes more and more rigid and more and more complex. We go for initially for exploratory research design. To start with exploratory research design, it is the most commonly unstructured informal research that is undertaken to gain the background information about the general nature of the research problems. It is usually conducted when the researcher does not know much about the problem and needs additional information or desires some more recent information in order to analyze the problem. These designs are most commonly unstructured and informal research, and the researcher does not know much about the problem. The main purpose of this design, where it can be used practically, is to analyze a particular problem, to discover new ideas, to develop the concept more clearly, to establish research priorities, to gain background information, to define the new terms, and to clarify the problems and hypotheses. Generally, exploratory studies are conducted at very initial stage of problem identification itself. Of course, it is optional. If you are very clear with the problem right from the beginning, then you don't need to go for such exploratory design. But initially, if you are not clear with any specific problem, then the process is, first you have to detect the symptoms. So symptoms detection is the first stage. From that you will go for analysis of the current situation. That will lead to this you can do through exploratory research, which may lead to problem definition, and finally you will be able to frame your research objectives in terms of statements. So thus exploratory research is a very preliminary kind of research which is done at the very initial stage in order to identify the problem itself many times. Initial research is conducted to clarify and define the nature of problem. It does not provide conclusive evidence. Here the purpose is only to identify the problem, not to decide anything about the solution of the problem, or not to arrive at any conclusion regarding the problem. And subsequent research is expected because it leads, the outcome of this exploratory study is only the problem statement. Okay, and that problem still needs to be solved. So that has to be solved further through more complex research designs. And that is the reason why exploratory research is more based upon qualitative data rather than quantitative data, because it is at the initial level you are trying to identify the situation, you are trying to identify the problem, you are trying to identify the research questions and frame the research objectives from all the scenarios which are available around you and all the constraints which are available around you. You have to identify, you have to examine the constraints, and based upon that you have to identify your exact problem statement. So that is the stage where exploratory research is used, and that's why it is more relying upon qualitative data. So why to conduct the exploratory study? The reason is, first is to diagnose a situation. So sometimes it is also called diagnostic research. For screening of the alternatives, what are the possible alternatives, ways to solve a particular problem, that you can identify from exploratory research, and discovering new ideas. You can come up with some new ideas to solve the problems and to come up with the final solutions to the problems. Various methods for conducting exploratory research. They are secondary data analysis. Most of the times we are relying upon the secondary data which is already available through the past literature or maybe through some databases, whereby similar kind of studies have been done in past, and you are trying to study the nature of their data, the analysis which what they have conducted, and what kind of results they have obtained. Another method is experience surveys, where or experience polls you can say, where you are taking the opinions of the experts of the same field which, under which you are studying, and you are trying to concentrate more upon their responses and their opinions regarding the particular problem. Third method is case analysis, where we are trying to analyze the particular case in details as regards what was the scenario, what kind of objectives they had in their study, and how they have tackled with the problem, and in what way they have come up with the solution to the problem. So that is case analysis. Next is focus group, where you are forming the group of some experts, 8 to 10 experts, with a moderator controlling the focus group, and a focus group discussions are made on the problems as regards the alternative solutions to the same problem, and ultimately they try to come up with the unanimous solution to the problem. Pilot study, it is necessary before conducting a full-fledged study several times, because a full-fledged study may require longer time and cost factors. So it is necessary to conduct pilot study before full-fledged study in order to assure the reliability and validity of the results and validity of the instrument which you are using for data collection purpose, so that at the end of the study you will be able to serve your objectives in a well-structured manner. And last is projective techniques. These are the indirect ways of data collection. They are more used in psychological kind of studies or human resource management and all, where you are trying to deal with the persons directly through indirect methods. You may not be able to, you may not be asking direct questions, but you are using some indirect tests to collect the data, such as word association test, sentence completion test, or story completion test, and there are many more projective techniques which can be used for indirect data collection methods. All these methods can be used for exploratory purpose at the initial stages. The next, we move to the next level of design, which is descriptive research design. It is also called diagnostic research design. There is a slight difference between both of them. Descriptive research studies are those studies which are concerned with describing the characteristics of the particular individual or of a group, whereas diagnostic studies determine the frequency with which the some particular event occurs, or how it is associated with something else. So ultimately, both of them are under the same category of descriptive design only, but with a minor difference, that descriptive tries to describe the inbuilt characteristics of the data set, whereas diagnostic research aims to identify the frequency with which a particular event is occurring, so that we can find out which events are more sincere and more critical to the purpose of our study. Data types are very important to go before we go for any descriptive designs, because of the data which we have on hand, the nature and availability of the data, that is going to affect the choice of the research designs very greatly. So data types, mainly they are cross-sectional, time series and pooled data. Time series data, when we say, it is related to the period, that is the data on a particular variable over the period of time. Let us say we have the financial statements of the company over the past 10 years. Every year we have got the data on the variables, the financial variables of the company for past 10 years. So that is related to time. So that is called time series data. Another is cross-sectional data, where you are talking about the single section of the population at a particular fixed time interval, fixed point of time. That is called cross-sectional data, where it is called the one-dimensional data, where time is not changing, time period is fixed, but you are studying various sections of the population or various sections of the society at particular point of time. That is cross-sectional data. Third category is pooled data, which is combination of time series and cross-sectional data, where you may be trying to pool up the data in the time form as well as in the form of cross sections. For example, say pharmaceutical companies, then you have the data of 10 years of 7 pharmaceutical companies, each one for each year you will be having the data on 10 companies for all 10 years. So that will formulate the pool data. The last category is panel data or longitudinal data or micro panel data, where if we are talking about it is the type of pool data only, but where the same set of respondents are used for data collection after certain particular time intervals. So that is called panel data, where respondents don't change, but with the same set of respondents we are trying to collect the data periodically at different points of time intervals. That is called panel data or longitudinal data. Depending upon these data types, the descriptive designs, they have two main classifications: cross-sectional designs and longitudinal studies. That is depending upon the nature of study which we have used. So cross-sectional studies, they are very much easy and common type of studies in our research projects. They involve conducting the survey of a sample population elements at one point of time. They are useful to provide a quick snapshot of what's going on with the variables of interest of our research problem. They measure the units of sample of the population at only one point of time, and they are cross-sectional, whose samples are drawn in such a way to be representative of the particular specific section of the population. And online survey research is being used to collect the data for the cross-sectional surveys at the faster rate, okay, and that makes the procedures easy and quick. Cross-sectional studies, they are more simpler and more easy to conduct. The analysis is also relatively easier to conduct because they are not having the time variations. They are having only the variation due to the characteristics, different characteristics of the sections of the population at a particular point of time. So time variable is not the affecting variable in cross-sectional studies, and that means temporal effect is not there, and that's why you are trying to study the population only at a particular point of time. So of course these results may not be so widely generalizable because they are talking about only particular time period, but for the short run relatively shorter period, you can consider these results to be valid and generalizable for all such similar kind of problems. So they can be conducted on the subsection of the respondent population, and they can be either single or multiple cross sectional or cohort analysis. They are one shot study, and they need only one time contact of the respondents, and that is how it is much easier to conduct the study. They contain very simple kind of design there, where you want to decide, you want to find out the study population, their characteristics, and the distinction between the various sections of the population in relation to specific characteristics regarding the particular data only, regarding the particular population only, at a particular point of time only. So the best for finding out about the descriptive research design is, you need a phenomenon to be analyzed, you need to analyze a particular situation prevailing at a particular point of time, you need to analyze some problem, and you need to know the attitudes towards the problem, the perception of the respondents towards the problem, and several issues can be addressed through the cross-sectional study, but at given point of time only. The examples of these cross-sectional designs may be impact of management on street crime, okay, at a particular, in the particular year, let us say. Then the health needs of a community, the attitude of the students toward the facilities available in the library, extent of unemployment rate in a big city, and customer satisfaction with a product. All these phenomena you can see we are talking about at a single point of time, not at the different time intervals, and that's why they may relate to cross-sectional designs. Main advantages of the cross-sectional design that they are cheap to undertake and easy to analyze, but major disadvantage is that they cannot measure change over time, because they are relating to a single time period. Temporal effects cannot be measured. For temporal effects, we have got the design which is called longitudinal studies, which are depending upon the time period. These longitudinal studies may include time series data as well as panel data, that is pool data and panel data, where it is the combination of time series and cross-sectional data both. Again, online surveys can be conducted to collect the data here, but again data collection process may be periodic. They have to be conducted on periodic intervals. So longitudinal studies, again when we are talking about the panel data, they can have two types of panels: continuous panels and omnibus panels or discontinuous panels. Continuous panels are when the panel members are asked the same question for each panel measurement, and omnibus panels are every time you are trying to ask them new questions. So that is how you can distinguish between continuous panels and omnibus panels. Both the kinds of panels can be used depending upon the nature of study. Longitudinal data can be used for market tracking, brand switching, and attitude and image checks. Longitudinal studies, they help in identifying the pattern of change in relation to time. They help in studying the population which is visited number of times at equal intervals of time, sometimes fixed intervals, sometimes not fixed intervals. When you are making some event study, then it may not be fixed because it depends upon when the event occurs. So the time interval may not be fixed, but sometimes you may choose the fixed particular time interval, and at all the periodic intervals you are going to collect the information. It is useful when the factual information is on a continuous basis, it is needed. Information gathering technique is same each time, and study population is same, but not necessarily the same respondents. You can have same respondents or different respondents, because our main aim is to study the nature of variable over the period of time, the fluctuations in the variable over the period of time. So longitudinal studies, they have three different criteria. The study involves the selection of the representative group as a panel. There is a repeated measurement of the research variables on this panel over the fixed intervals of time, and once selected the panel composition, it needs to stay constant over the study period. So whatever period of study you have chosen, say 5 years or 10 years or 7 years, but for that particular period, the nature of study which you are conducting, that is the variables which you have included, and the panel composition, that should remain same. It is an investigation that involves taking repeated measurements over time. It is useful for conducting trend analysis, tracking the changes in the behavior over time, that is brand switching, level of awareness, turnover, monitoring long-term effects of the marketing activities, for example marketing shares, pricing effects, etc. And it may be relying upon true panel or omnibus panel. As may be seen, as represented by the cross-sectional study, here the data is collected in longitudinal design, the data is collected on the regular basis over periodic intervals, and therefore some advantages are there with this design, that you can conduct before after kind of studies with this kind of data. Okay, and that's why the respondents become familiar with the pattern and respond to the data questions without thinking. Many times it happens, and that's why it is very necessary to choose an appropriate descriptive design. So some criteria you have to use for selecting an appropriate descriptive design. The first is examining the sequences across the time. If the sequence across the time is of only one group, if you are talking about the study of only a single group, then in that case, if it is single group, then you can go for descriptive design. If it is not a single group, more than one group, then you can go for comparative descriptive designs. If you are talking about examining over the time period, that is across the time period, then, and if it is you are talking about the same subjects across the time period, then you can go for single unit of the study, and if it is not, then data is collected across different time intervals. Again, if it is not collected over different time intervals, then it goes to cross-sectional design. But if it is included on different time intervals, then you have to partition the total time interval into time slots, and the data may be collected over different time slots. Or if you want to go for the overall analysis or identify the overall pattern in the data set, then that will lead to trend analysis. But if you want to go for the partition data, then in that case you can go for repeated measures on each subject, and that will again lead to cross-sectional design with treatment partitioning. If it is not going for the repeated measurement, then you can go for the longitudinal design with the treatment plan. And if it is a single unit study, and in that case either you can go for longitudinal study, that is over the period of time, or you can go for a case study for a particular time period. So this is how you can use the the criteria for selecting the appropriate descriptive design. The descriptive designs can be diagrammatically represented in this way. The first part is clarification, which leads to measurement, which leads to description of the variables one by one, and ultimately leading to interpretation of the meaning and development of the hypothesis. The descriptive designs may be for single group or more than one group. When you are talking about more than one groups, you can go for comparative design, comparative descriptive designs, where you are trying to compare both the groups with regards to certain set of selected variables, and you are trying to examine the effect of those variables over the period of time with the same set of data sets between the two groups, and what are the distinct characteristics of both the groups. That has to be interpreted, and on that basis the hypothesis has to be developed. There can be correlational designs, which try to describe the relation among the variables, and they try to examine the extent and degree of relationship between the variables. There can be predicted relationships, which try to predict the future relationship among the variables, what kind of predictive behavior the variables have, that can be examined. And the third is testing the theoretically proposed relationships, that is model testing design, where the model is already established and you simply want to check how far it is empirically valid with the given data set. So that is called model testing design. So these are all the types of correlational designs. Again, when you have got more than two groups or more than two variables or several variables under study at your hand, then you can go for descriptive correlational designs, where again you have to study the relationship between every pair of variables. Fine. Suppose you have got 5 variables, then you have to choose every pair of these 5 variables one by one and examine their correlation, and examine the pattern of changes in one variable due to the changes in the another variable, and examine what kind of relationship is persisting between them. Finally, distinguishing between exploratory and descriptive research design, we can describe these differences on the basis of our own initial criteria or the levels of research design which we had defined, that is sampling design, statistical design, observational design, and operational design. As regards the overall design is concerned, exploratory design is more flexible, whereas descriptive design is more rigid, because in exploratory design we have got unstructured design, and we don't know the problem, we are trying to search for the problem, whereas in descriptive design we are trying to describe the inbuilt characteristics of the data set, and that's why it is more rigid. Sampling design, as far it is concerned, non-probability sampling and mostly purposive sampling is more relevant in case of exploratory design, whereas probability sampling is more preferred when you are going for descriptive designs. Statistical designs, when you are talking about, then there is no pre-planned design for exploratory analysis, because you are trying to search out, you are trying to identify what the things are in the particular situation. So you cannot go for any planned kind of strategy there. Okay, but whereas when you are talking about descriptive designs, then we always have pre-planned design for analysis. Observational designs are unstructured instruments for the collection of the data, whereas in descriptive designs we have structured or well structured, maybe questionnaires or schedules prepared well in advance for the data collection. Operational designs, they don't have any fixed decisions about the operational procedures, whereas in case of descriptive designs, they have advanced decisions about the operational procedures. This is how exploratory and descriptive designs, they distinguish from each other. And now the last and the highest category or highest level of the research designs and most complex research design, it is called causal research design, with which we are dealing now. So causal design, it always tries to identify the cause and effect relationship between the variables. It tries to establish the model which explains the cause and effect relationship between the variables. If one variable is independent and which is the dependent, you can identify clearly which are the independent variables and which are the dependent variables. So it is a kind of if-then kind of statements can be used to explain the cause and effect relationship. Example is given that if the yellow pages ad are in color, then the consumer's attitudes towards the product will be higher than if the ad is in the black and white color. Okay, so you want to know what is the effect of color on the preferences of the consumers. So such causal relations can be identified, and there must be some evidences to support the causation. It may be through the concomitant variation, that is, if X is supposed to cause Y, then the two variables must move together. That is simultaneous change in both the variables, which is measured by covariance in statistics. If one variable changes, we should observe the resulting change in the other also. So that is called covariance. The second is time order in occurrence, that is, if X is supposed to cause Y, then X must precede Y. That is, first X must occur, then that will lead to occurrence of Y. Elimination of the other possible causes, that is, if X causes Y, then no other factor could have reasonably caused the change in Y at that particular moment. That is, whenever we are measuring the impact between X and Y, we are assuming all the other factors affecting Y to remain constant. It is only the effect of change in X is measured over the change in Y. So it must hold rather all variables are constant, and this assumption is called ceteris paribus in economics. So causality may be thought of as understanding a phenomenon in terms of the conditional statements of the form if X then Y. Causal relationships are typically determined by the use of experiments, but other methods are also used. We will see the various methods. All the experiments are divided into two categories, formal and informal experiments. Cause and effect relationships would normally not question that there are causes and effects. There seems to be apparent necessity in the causal relation. Means through the theoretical setup, only majority of the times we can identify that these are the cause variables and these are the effect variables. So causation reduces the spatio-temporal contiguity, succession and constant conjunction. Regularities are just things or processes that we see repeated in nature, and they have no epistemic justification for showing that they are or saying that they are necessary. That means you don't need any specific epistemic justification. Just by logic, simple logic, you can identify that these are the cause variables and these are the effect variables. Only problem is to measure the extent of relationship, that is, how far does the cause variable affect the effect variables. So the regularity view of causation says that causation tells us that the causation happens in virtue of something else. Okay, so we can just stop the causation and identify the causation, and then try to measure the causation effect, that if this happens, then what will be the effect on the Y variable. There is a similarity between words and causation. To evaluate the words with regard to the matter of facts and laws, some of these matters of facts will be causal. The law of nature sometimes considered to be causal, that is, whether the objects fall to the ground will depend on whether they are supported. How far you can jump will depend on whether the laws of gravitation hold. So where we determine the truth conditions for the certain conjecturals, we already have to assume that certain causal facts either obtain or do not obtain in the worlds we evaluate with regard to their similarity. That means that ultimately the entire world may work on certain extent of cause and effect relationship. It is the role of the researcher to identify that to what extent the particular set of variables causes the set of another variables, and that's why it depends upon the degree of causality, and the degree of causality can be identified at 3 levels. First is very weak causality, where you have same causes and same effects. Second is strong causality, where you have similar type of cause and effect variables, and the third is chaotic behavior, where all the variables might be interrelated with each other and you will be having some different effects on the single variable from different variables. So that is called chaotic behavior. So the cause and effect relationship, it is necessary to formulate them in the form of a function to express the mathematical relationship or the mathematical extent to which the variables are related. So we need to establish the functional relationship between the factors, and that is based upon the systematic context for that information between the relationship. Now the main question is how to distinguish between causal and non-causal correlation. Okay, the answer is through a controlled experiment. Okay, experiments are the best way to satisfy the elements of causation. It may be field experiment or laboratory experiment. The trade-off is always between the realism versus control. The examples of experimentation in field of marketing, generally when we are performing the experiments, they can be used for market testing, that is test marketing, advertising responses, promotional designs, storing the layout and designing, product positioning, color tracking and package designing. The causal predictive research design. Causal research design, their main purpose is prediction. So they are very highly used in predictive modeling, and the main structure of the causal research design for prediction purpose is you have some value of intercept plus value of some variable 1, independent variable 1, value of independent variable 2, as many variables you have you can add, and that will ultimately lead to the predicted value of the dependent variable. So the predictive model relies upon this structure of the relationship between the variables, that ultimately they have some intercept value. Here the intercept value indicates the level of prediction or the level of variation in y which occurs even when all the variables are constant. All the independent variables are constant, then also what changes are occurring in y, that is represented by the intercept value. And the next part we need to study in details is the experimental designs, because experimental designs are the major ways in which the causal research designs can be conducted scientifically. Fine. So we need to study the nature of experimental designs in details, that we will discuss in the next part. Welcome back to the continuation of the last session on research designs. Here we discuss in detail the experimental designs, which is the part of the causal research designs. And as I said, causal research designs, they can be conducted, they can be applied in a well scientific and well structured manner using experiments. Experimental designs, they formulate the well structured way in which we can establish the relationship between the variables. They include the set of variables which are to be identified in order to examine how they play the role to affect the particular real life phenomenon. So we can identify the variables as independent variable, treatment variables, dependent variable, extraneous variable and chance variables. Independent variables, which as we all know, they are the one which control the dependent variable, but one which affect the dependent variable, such as price, packaging, distribution, product features, etc. Treatment is the independent variable which is manipulated during an experiment to measure the effect on the dependent variable. Dependent variables is one which is affected by the set of independent variables and the treatment variable. And we have extraneous variable mainly, which is the needed to be more analyzed in detail, because these variables are going to affect the dependent variable indirectly. They are not directly affecting the dependent variables, but they can be analyzed to have some effect on the dependent variables, which is hidden effect. So these variables are also called hidden variables. In extraneous variables, they may be called hidden variables. And the main examples so you can give for extraneous variables, maybe say brand of fuel affects the fuel consumption per kilometer in charge. Then what are the extraneous variables? Fine. Here the extraneous variables will be what? When you are talking about the fuel consumption per kilometer, Then it may be the engine technology which may be affecting as an extraneous variable. That is what kind of engine, efficiency of engine, whether how far it is able to use the fuel efficiency. Fine. So that is going to be an extraneous variable. Then type of display in a supermarket affects the sales of apples. Fine. What are the extraneous variable here? What can be the extraneous variable here? The location in which they are displayed, okay, the environment in which they are displayed, the way in which they are displayed in the cold storage or in the haphazard manner, in the open manner, fine, how they are maintained, how they are displayed in the super mall, that is going to be an extraneous variable. So extraneous variable, as here it is shown in the figure, X correlates with Y, but there is a variable Z which also affects Y, but that is in a hidden manner. Z may be affecting X, Z may be affecting Y, both of them in an indirect way, but that the effect of Z will be hidden effect, and that's why it is called extraneous variable. But ultimately it has to be included in order to measure the effect, the total effect in Y. Okay. So the main problem of an experimental design or an experiment is how to control these extraneous variables, the effect of the extraneous variables. Because independent variables, we have the data on hand, we can measure them easily and we can input them as the input variables in the design. But extraneous variables, they are hidden variables. So we need to identify their effects from the real environment and we need to control their effects so that the effect of only the independent variables can be examined directly over the dependent variable. So there are some ways and means to control the variation in the extraneous variables. The simple ways are randomization, physical control, test design control, statistical control. All these principles of design can be used to control the extraneous variables. Randomization is just allocating the treatment to the experimental units in purely random manner without any bias. That is, for example, if I am taking an exam in a class, fine, then I don't look about who is the student. I'll ask any question to any student without any bias in my mind that this particular student is an intelligent student or not. Okay, so that is called randomization. Another is physical control, that is holding the constant value or the level of the extraneous variable throughout the course of an experiment. That is, you are assuming the extraneous variable to remain constant throughout the experiment for the particular time period, and you are trying to examine the effect between the independent variable and dependent variable, assuming that all the extraneous variables are constant. Test design control, that is use of the experimental designs to control the extraneous causal factors. You can use some designs, some experiments, some small experiments from the past experiences, etc. You may realize that the ideal value of the particular extraneous variable should be this much in this particular situation. Then you can assume that value as the fixed value. So that is called test design control. And the last one is statistical control, which adjusts for the effects of the extraneous variable by statistically adjusting the value of the dependent variable for each treatment condition. Okay. That is, we are trying to fix the extraneous variable based upon statistical analysis. So that is what is called controlling the extraneous variable, and that is very important in order to make the experimental designs efficient and more accurate. Experimental settings can be of two types: laboratory experiment and field experiment. Laboratory experiments, they are conducted in a controlled setting where you are working in the specific environment which is artificially created, just approximately nearer to the real environment, and you are trying to perform the experiment in the control scenario. Whereas field experiment is conducted outside the laboratory in the real environment, in the actual marketplace or actual environment, and they are more flexible enough. So two kinds of experiments can be conducted: laboratory experiments which are under the contrived or artificial settings, and field experiments which are under the natural settings. Now, how valid are experiments? That is a very good, very crucial question to be answered, because whatever experiments you are performing, you need to examine whether they will be sufficient enough to ensure the concrete and scientific and authentic results or not, or whether your experiment is valid enough to be performed for a particular scenario with a particular set of variables or not. For that purpose, you need to check the validity of the experiment. And the validity of the experiment again can be of two types: internal validity and external validity. Internal validity may be due to the observed changes in the dependent variable, due to the independent variables that is internal validity, that is how far do the independent variables affect the dependent variable, that can be checked through internal validity. And if the results of the experiment apply to the real world outside the experimental setting, then that is including the external validity. So internal validity is the extent to which the competing explanations for the results observed can be ruled out, whereas external validity is the extent to which the causal correlations measured can be generalized outside for the outside person, settings and times. So we can say that external validity relates to the generalizability of the results of the experiment, whereas internal validity, it relates to the nature of the variables included in the study, the relationship between those variables, and how to measure the relationship between the variables. So the experiment is valid internally if the observed changes in the dependent variable due to the independent variables are studied and they are examined. But the threats to the internal validity are selection bias, that is, you may not have selected the variables which are really useful for explaining the particular phenomenon. So that can be the selection bias. If your instrument of data collection may be not valid in the condition, in the particular conditions. In one particular condition you can use it, but if the environment changes or if the condition changes, then you may not be able to use the same set of questions. History effects might be there, that is the changes in the environment after pre-test. Okay, once you have suppose I have told you that in the class, if I have taken one examination in the class suddenly without any intimation, okay, then in that case the students will not be alert. But once or twice if I do this exercise, then students will remain alert that ma'am may ask the questions anytime and conduct the test anytime. So that will make them more alert and more hardworking and more accurate. Fine, and they will remain they'll form the habit of studying regularly. Fine. So that is called history effects. Then maturation effect, due to time between the pre and post test changes, it occurs. It is called maturation effect, because many times we find that if we just go on asking the respondents to fill up the questionnaire, they are bored, they are tired, and they feel themselves fatigued, and they are not ready to answer with greater enthusiasm and inquisitiveness. So it is very necessary that we should reduce the maturation effect of the respondents before conducting the experiment, because in order to get the accurate answers and real picture of the phenomenon, the maturation effect should be minimized. Next is the mortality, that is when one or more subjects drop out after the pre-test. Many times it happens that the respondents, they find it very difficult to answer the questions, they find it tiresome, and they are not ready to continue further. So they may drop out before any other inquiry is conducted. If the results of the experimental study apply to the real world outside, then it refers to the external validity. And the threats to the external validity are realism, that is the experiment's context and conduct in the artificial environment, that is how far you have been able to create the artificial environment just similar to the real environment. Second is selection of the subject, that is representativeness of the sample of the population, how far your sample is representing the characteristics of the population. Whether if the sample itself is biased, then it may not give you the good and authentic and correct results. Generalizability, that the other factors could cast to be constant doubt the experimental results being relevant to the real world, that is how far you can generalize the results for the similar type of problems in the real world. That is also going to address the external validity. So experimental designs, it is where the researcher tests the hypothesis and causal relationship between the variables. Such studies require the procedures that will not be only reduce the bias but increase the reliability and will permit drawing inferences about the causality. So you are not only trying to study the causal relationship, but you are also trying to draw the inferences and come up with the predictive outcomes from the experimental designs by analyzing and interpreting their results. So experimental designs, the purpose is to enhance the power of the inference making by either eliminating the undesired independent variables from the site of experiment or minimizing their effect due to experimentation. That is, you need to keep in your study only those variables which are relevant to the purpose of study. All the unnecessarily variables should be eliminated before experimentation. It also allows the desired independent or experimental variables to their full exploitation for manipulation by the researcher or the research investigator. The study is based on nature of the investigation and the effect to be investigated in the given phenomenon is controlled or manipulated or not. So here the researcher introduces an intervention, that is it assume that the cause of change is the particular variable and waits until that it has produced and has been given the sufficient time to produce the change, and the independent variables will be observed, introduced, controlled or manipulated by the researcher as per the requirement of the study. The basic principles of experimental design are: formulate the questions or goals in advance, comparison of the goals, replication, randomization, stratification and factorial experiments. How to decide whether you should go for experimental or non-experimental design, that is described in this chapter or in this diagram, where it says that whether you should go for experimental design or not. Okay, that depends upon the extent of internal validity required, generalizability of the results required, and which one is more important, internal validity or external validity, which one you want to stress more in your study. Depending upon that, you have to decide whether you should go for experimental design or non-experimental design. Experimental design mainly it can be classified into two categories: formal and informal experimental designs. Informal experimental design, they are also called semi-experimental or quasi-experimental designs, and they include before, after study, without control and with control. It may be after only study without control and with control. Okay. And the formal experimental designs, they include CRD, that is a completely randomized design, randomized block design, Latin square design and factorial experiments. When we are talking about informal experimental designs, we have got the basic symbols to be understood for understanding the nature of each of the informal experimental designs. O is the measurement of the dependent variable, X is the manipulation or change in an independent variable, R is the random assignment of the subjects to the experimental or the control groups, and E is measuring the experimental effect. So experimental designs, they include experimental group, control group, treatment factor, treatment level, pre-test and post-test measurement. Pre-test, that is before applying the treatment, and after applying the treatment, that is post-test. And true or good experimental design and quasi-experimental designs, they are more talking about control of the extraneous variables. Main advantages of the experimental designs is more control in the design and conducting the study, increase the internal validity, decrease threats of the design validity, and few rival hypotheses. Here you are trying to test rival hypothesis and how far they are valid by conducting different experiments on the same experimental setup. The informal or quasi-experimental or semi-experimental designs, as I have briefed out previously, that it has the properties of both experimental and non-experimental studies, and they consist of after only designs, one group before after designs, and after only with control or without control designs. The more complicated designs are Solomon's 4 group designs. This is how the control designs are represented. After only design is represented by XO1, that is only after the treatment is applied. One group before after is O1 is the effect before applying the treatment, O2 is the effect after application. So the design is represented as O1 cross O2. When it is before after with control group, then the control group is introduced as O3 O4, and the overall experimental effect is measured as O2 minus O1 minus O4 minus O3. That is effect of treatment as well as effect of the change in the control group. So before after experiments, they are called informal experiments, and they can be treated through a particular treatments, and depending upon the level of the treatments applied to each of the informal experiments, we can define the pre and post test semi-experimental or quasi-experimental designs. These are the diagrams showing the nature of pre-test and post-test control group design. The only change here is when you are introducing the control group, then the results of that control group act as the benchmark, whereas the results of the independent variables, that is the results of the real variables, they give you the treatment effect, that is the effect of the treatment which you are applying. So some examples for the before after design, say impact of increased funding on the quality of teaching in the universities, effect of counseling services on marital relations, effects of advertisement on the sales of the product. Fine. So these are all called the before after type designs. Some disadvantages are there of this before after type designs. They are more difficult to implement and again more expensive, because you need to collect the data before the applying the treatment as well as after applying the treatment. Okay, they require longer time period to complete. The lapse time may cause the changes, maturation or withdrawal of the original population. It measures the total change, effect of the independent variable and extraneous variable. It cannot be quantified always. It is very difficult to quantify the effect of the extraneous variables. So this may act as the limitation of the non-experimental designs. Again, Solomon's 4-group design is there. We can see, which is the most complex design, which includes 4 different levels of the treatments applied, and at each trial, at each implementation of the treatment, the effectiveness of the treatments is measured. This is the diagram showing the type of experimental design to be selected, in what situation, what kind of quasi-experimental design or semi-experimental design you should select. So whether first you have to check whether you want to go for pre-test or not, whether there is control group or not. If there is a control group, then whether you want to go for pre-test or not. If you want to go for pre-test, then you can decide whether you want to go for repeated measures or not. Okay. If you don't want to go for pre-test, then whether you have to check whether it is one group design or several group design. If it is several group, then you have to go for comparative study. And if it is not a repeated kind of study, then you can go for strategy of comparison, which will suggest the re-evaluating design and comparing the treatment on the and control conditions if you want to go for comparison strategy. And ultimately you have to decide whether you want to go for one group pre-test, post-test or pre and post-test both. Then we come down to the formal experimental designs. The formal experimental designs have got very standardized statistical procedures of analysis and the standardized ways in which the treatments are to be applied to the experimental units. The 4 basic types of formal experimental designs are CRD, that is completely randomized design, where the treatments are applied to the experimental units in a very random manner, completely random manner, so that there is no bias in the application of the treatments to the experimental units. Second is randomized block design, where the experimental units are divided into homogeneous blocks and within the blocks the treatments are applied randomly. So that is the structure of randomized block designs. Then the third one is Latin square design. As the name suggests, it is of the square structure. That is, the number of rows and columns will be equal. And here the randomization is adopted in row wise, column wise as well as treatment wise. And every treatment consists of one treatment in every row and every column only once. That is the structure of LSD. And finally factorial designs. These are highly used in agricultural experiments, where you want to apply the treatments at different levels. Say for example fertilizers, I want to apply it at low, moderate and high levels. Okay, then I can decide the levels of the treatment differently of the different type of fertilizers, and then you go for the treatment combinations, that is low level of fertilizer 1, medium level of fertilizer 2 and high level of fertilizer 3, and then you try to examine the effect of this combination on the total yield of the crop. Similarly for all possible combinations. So that is called factorial designs. So here we are measuring the effects of the treatment levels at that which are called factors to the ultimate yield of the treatment or ultimate effect of the treatment. So to summarize all the causal research designs, we have seen that causal relationships, they mainly aim upon establishing the cause and effect relationship. They are mainly based upon the experimental studies, where experimental studies can be either experimental or quasi-experimental, and they can be all examined for their validity, internal and external validity, and some ethical issues have to be considered while adopting experimental research, because we have to see that there is no bias of the researcher involved in performing the experiment. So some ethical issues related to the experimental research are that you can't pressurize the people to participate, keep the subjects safe from free from the physical and mental stress. You must explain them the procedures correctly and elaboratively. must not deceive the subjects as to the purpose of the research. As far as possible, don't try to disclose the purpose of the study, because they might be giving you the biased answers. Fine. Allow the subjects to withdraw if they want to exit in between the inquiry, then they should have the freedom. Confidentiality and privacy should be maintained, and debrief the subject fully and accurately after the experiment. So once you have finished the entire study, then you should explain the purpose, the procedure, and the results and the outcome of the experiment fully to the respondents to whom you have answered or you have included in your study. How to select the experimental design? This is again the chart helping you to select the appropriate experimental design. As I suggested, whether you want to go for formal or informal experimental design, that you have to check based upon what kind of purpose of study you have and what kind of population you have. Fine. In the formal experimental design, it is very necessary that you must be able to identify the blocks. If you want to apply RBD, for example, then you must be able to identify the blocks, that is the set of homogeneous units with respect to some characteristic. Then only you can go for RBD. So every design has got its own characteristics, and you have to rely upon those characteristics. You have to first identify whether the study population includes those characteristics or not, or can you classify them as per the characteristic or not. Then only you can use a particular design. Then we move to the non-experimental designs. Okay, the choice between non-experimental designs and experimental designs, that again depend upon the changes and the relationship between the dependent and independent variables and the nature of the study population. Okay, as per the classification, modern classification, depending upon the reference point, the non-experimental designs, they are classified into 3 categories: retrospective, prospective, and combination of both. And when we are talking about retrospective designs, okay, they try to investigate the phenomenon from what has happened in past, that is in relation to past. Up till now, what has been the experience in a particular type of study where the particular set of variables has been included. So you are trying to examine the relationship between the variables from the past perspective. That is called retrospective design. The examples are living conditions of the aboriginal in Australia in early 20th century, and migratory movements in the subcontinent at the time of partition. Okay, so these are related to past events. So what was the scenario during those events? That is studied with reference to the past events. So that is why it is called retrospective design. Okay, and here of course we are going to use the secondary data or recall data which is related to the past, and the study population will be the present population or based upon the secondary data collection. The another category of non-experimental design is prospective study design, which refers to the likely prevalence of the situation which will happen in future. So what kind of phenomenon, situation or problem or attitude or outcome can happen in future. So we are trying to predict it, what kind of scenario may prevail in future. So the study here attempts to establish the outcome of an event and what is likely to happen. Okay, and here usually it is classified as prospective studies where the researcher must wait for an intervention to register its effect on the study population, whereas in case of prospective studies, your study population, the preliminary data can be based upon primary or secondary data, but mainly the futuristic data is based upon primary study. Examples of the prospective design: to find out the effect of parental involvement on the level of academic achievement of their children. Okay, that is one example for prospective design. Means what will be the effect on children of the parental involvement. Then, and to measure the effects of the change in the migration policy on the extent of immigration in a particular country, in Australia. Okay, so what will happen due to some policy decision, and what will be the effect of that particular decision in future. Then there is a combination of both, that is retrospective and prospective design. It focuses on the past trend in the phenomenon and study them into the future. That is what was in the scenario in the past and how that will affect the future. That is how the study is conducted. And here the data collection is done in different stages. Firstly, retrospectively from the existing records before the intervention is introduced, and the study population is followed to ascertain the impact of intervention. So here we can see it will use the combination of both primary and secondary data. Fine. In relation to the past studies, it will use the secondary data. In relation to the present study, it may use secondary as well as primary data. And in order to predict the future, again it may use primary data. Okay. The features of this design are that there is no control group, because you cannot have any benchmark or any reference group, because you don't know what is going to be the response of the respondents in future based upon the experiences in the past. Most before the after studies, if no intervention, are retrospective and prospective studies. Okay, the examples are the effect of incentives on the productivity of employees of an organization. It is not that if the incentives are increased, necessarily the employees will perform better, isn't it? The impact of maternal and child health services on the infant mortality rate, and the effects of an advertisement on the sales of the product. It is very difficult to examine the exact impact of the advertisement on the sales. Fine, that is it always that the sales have increased only due to the particular advertisement or not. It's very difficult to examine. The next classification is quantitative and qualitative research. The quantitative research and qualitative research, both the types of research, they are relevant to the particular objective of study. Some objectives of the study, they require purely qualitative research, whereas some objectives cannot be fulfilled without quantitative analysis. Okay. So here the purpose is to examine the small versus large sample, broad range of questioning versus structured questions, and subjective interpretation versus statistical analysis. The research designs also can be classified associated with quantitative and qualitative research. Based upon the quantitative research, the crossover experimental designs are suggested. They can be including trend studies, cohort studies, panel studies, blind studies, and double blind studies. Each one of them is explained over here. As for example, say trend studies means of course it tries to identify the long term trend prevailing in the variables, and cohort studies, they are trying to study the particular section of population, that is a particular group of people, that is a cohort. Panel studies, we have seen that they are the combination of both time series and cross sectional data over the same set of respondents. Blind studies, just they look at the overview of the results of the studies conducted in the past, and double blind studies, they try to examine and re-examine just the pros and cons of each of the studies conducted in the past. These have been explained over here. The designs related to the qualitative research are case study, oral history, focus group or group interviews, participant observation, holistic research, community discussion forums, and reflective journal logs. Fine, you can use any of these designs for qualitative research studies. Each one of them is explained over here. As the name suggests, the explanations are very simple, so I am not discussing them. You can go through the explanation here. Okay. There are some other unique study designs which are used for specific purpose apart from all the designs which we have discussed up till now. Fine. They are action research, collaborative inquiry or participatory research, and feminist research. Action research, as the name suggests, it should be action oriented research. That is, at the end of the research study, you have to suggest some specific set of actions which need to be conducted in order to implement the particular solution. Collaborative or inquiry or participatory research is where each person is free to participate in conducting the research, explain his own views and attitudes and beliefs, and discuss out the solutions jointly. Okay, so that is collaborative research. And feminist research, again as the name suggests, it is related to research on the women studies, women problems. So these these designs are explained over here. I have already explained in brief. You can go through the details here. Okay, and finally, again selecting the design. How will you select an appropriate design in a particular situation? That is whether you should go for descriptive design or exploratory design or causal design. Again, in causal design, you should go for experimental or non-experimental or quasi-experimental design. When you should choose a particular design, in what situation, which design will be useful. So this diagram indicates the guideline for choice of the particular design. Okay. And now comes to how to develop the design for your purpose, in your proposal, in your research proposal. So first you have to identify the design and name it specifically. That is very important. Many times the student research scholar, we find that he has conducted entire research, and when it comes to noting down that which kind of design he has used, he is confused that what kind of research design you have used. Fine. So for writing down or for explaining which kind of research design you have used, you must be clear with what you have actually done in your research study, and it is based upon which design, which particular design or which combination of designs in your study. Fine. So you should provide a map of the design. First of all, you try to develop a map of the design, that is, try to describe the stepwise process of what you have done in your research study. Fine. Discuss your rationale for using this design, that is, why you have used a particular design. If it is descriptive, then why you have relied upon descriptive only, or if you have used causal, then why you have used the causal research design only, what is your purpose, and that should be related to your objectives. Okay. Describe the threats to the validity of the chosen design. So do not only describe the design, but also describe the limitations of that design, and what is the threat to the validity, that is, how far the design is going to give you the valid and reliable and generalizable results. Finally, we go for the limitations of the research design, that is, what can be the major limitations of any research design. First is the non-availability of the sufficient data, non-availability of the resources like money, manpower and infrastructure and all. Okay. Inadequate time in the formulation of the research design, poor skill and ability of the research scholar, and unforeseen development